The critical time in 2020. World citizens united for now and beyond. You are a very important person in this world. This world needs you. Be the spark that ignites change. Human rights, peace, and sustainable development are three major focuses of the United Nations Charter, the founding document of the United Nations that was signed 75 years ago. Dr. Hong Daozi, Vice President of Association of World Citizens, NGO in consultative status with ECO-SOC and associated with the United Nations DPI, has promoted justice, peace, and human rights by various means for 20 years. Dr. Hong has led volunteers to 101 countries all over the world to unite kind-hearted people and promote human rights. Conscience makes the world go around. Setting out from individual towards the world, the volunteers have continued each year to take part in major events such as the annual United Nations DPI NGO Conference. The promoters of justice and peace are you and me. The elderly, middle-aged, and young, three generations of volunteers participate in United Nations DPI NGO conferences, widely establishing friendships with like-minded NGO groups and individuals, striving for global sustainable development, hoping to protect the world together, and to take action for human rights. We hope that everyone will begin with oneself, activate the goodness, the conscience within the deepest innermost heart, and work together with one another to change the world with conscience, to build a future of hope.
Hi everyone! Thank you for joining us today for today's Virtual Youth Forum, The Future We Want, the Right We Need. The Association of World Citizens Taiwan has decided to host this forum to encourage conversation about how we can approach human rights protection. It is an honor to be joined by a group of passionate youth from around the world. Hi everyone! So let's start by inviting our speakers to say hi and briefly introduce themselves, starting with Andy. Hi Andy!
Hello everyone, I'm Andy Liu. I'm a medical student. I study in Taiwan. Hello.
Thank you for joining us. And next we have Alan. Hi Alan.
Hi, I'm Alan, and I am a student in the United States.
Awesome. And next we have Emmy. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Emmy. I'm currently a master's student in San Jose State University.
Very cool. And next we'd like to welcome Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm a university student that studies in Abu Dhabi.
Very cool. And let's welcome next Jill. Hi, Jill.
Hello, I'm Jill, and currently I work in a financial institution in Hong Kong.
Very cool. And hi, Matthew.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and I'm a student studying in Boston, and I'm currently taking a gap year due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Matthew. And last, we have Wen. Hi, Wen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wen. I'm an MBA candidate at College of William & Mary in Virginia, USA.
Hi, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining us. And I think it's very important that we try to have these conversations to bring awareness not only to the people around us. I personally think it brings awareness to ourselves once again to remind us that there is a lot of things that we can do starting with our own community. So thank you and a big welcome to you all. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and passion for our future. And so with our discussion today on human rights, it's actually very meaningful as it is also the United Nations Day today. And this year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and its founding charter. So let's now take a look at the message from the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Dear friends, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations falls in the middle of a global pandemic. Our founding mission is more critical than ever, to promote human dignity, protect human rights, respect international law, and save humanity from war. When the pandemic hit, I called for a global ceasefire. In our world today, we have one common enemy, COVID-19. Now is the time for a stepped-up push for peace to achieve a global ceasefire. The clock is ticking. And we must also make peace with our planet. The climate emergency threatens life itself. We must mobilize the whole world to reach carbon neutrality, net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. A growing number of cities, countries and companies have already pledged to meet this goal. Around the world, we must do more to end human suffering from poverty, inequality, hunger and hatred, and fight discrimination on the basis of race, religion, gender or any other distinction. The months of pandemic have seen a horrific rise in violence against women and girls. We must build on progress. A remarkable global collaboration is underway for a safe, affordable and accessible COVID-19 vaccine for all. The Sustainable Development Goals give us an inspiring blueprint for recovering better. We face colossal challenges. With global solidarity and cooperation, we can overcome them. That's what United Nations is all about. On this anniversary, I ask people everywhere to join together. The United Nations not only stands with you, the United Nations belongs to you and is you with the peoples. Together, let us uphold the enduring values of the United Nations Charter. Let us build on our advances across the decades. Let us realize our shared vision of a better world for all.
Indeed, let us realize our shared vision of a better world for all. It is stated under the UN Charter that the people of the United Nations are determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and for these ends to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security. So we are good neighbors even though we're far apart, and we hope that through today's conversation we can increase the awareness and methods, if you will, of how we can achieve international peace and security. And as the United Nations celebrates the 75th anniversary, we would like to invite you to share with us your understanding of the UN and what you would like to share about its founding spirit. So first, let's hear from Wen. What do you think?
Hey, thank you, Judy. First, I would like to congratulate the United Nations, their 75th anniversary. And I really appreciate their main purpose is to maintain international peace and security and achieve a cooperation in solving international problems. Especially nowadays, there are several topics and issues that are global scale and need a transnational solution to deal with it, such as climate change, migration issues, economics, or of course the impact of COVID-19. Therefore, as a neutral third party, the United Nations can be a coordinator that helps multiple governments to team up with each other to come up with the best or optimal solution and deal with those issues. And also, when each country, they make efforts to pursue their own economic growth, this organization can remind them the importance of peace, human rights, diversity. So therefore, their purpose are really make our world better in several different perspectives.
I think what Wen says is really great because that's what I was thinking as well. Like, you know, the United Nations being built at the end of World War II was because, you know, we understand that we cannot have another World War III or else, you know, this world cannot function anymore. And so I was looking up the goal and purpose of the United Nations. It was to maintain international peace and security, for friendly relation, to achieve international cooperation, and like for harmonizing actions. So I think all of these things are things that all of us in this world are looking for, and having the United Nations is constantly reminding each countries of this goal. And even though like each country, maybe they have their own like economic perspective or like cultural perspective, but having the United Nations continues to remind us to respect other people's culture and to also remind each of us that we're world citizens and we need to build and work together in order to have a better world. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking when I was thinking about the start of United Nations.
Yeah, I think, like you guys said, there actually the United Nations, since it's been around for 75 years, it has to have a lot of experience, and I'm sure they put in a lot of effort to come up with the charter. And so the established guidelines and experiences are what we can build off from, right, to create more of these peaceful conversations into action and build these societies. So we can build from the United Nations and bring peace and human rights into our own lives. And as we mentioned that our youth are from different parts of the world, we'd now like to invite them to share what their thoughts are on the global development, the global situation right now on human rights issues based on their experiences and background. So would anyone like to start off with that one?
Yeah, I would like. From my point of view, the world is facing a big, very specific, but very difficult challenge, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic. The total number of confirmed diagnoses is over 40 million, and the death has exceeded 1 million, especially now that the weather in the Northern Hemisphere is getting colder. The pandemic situation is on the rise again. Like in Europe, the number of confirmed cases in the UK and France both exceeded 20,000 in a single day, and the government has once again raised the level of pandemic prevention and restricted social activities. So this wave of pandemic further derives economic problems from health problems and affects every single person in the world. Yeah.
I think to continue from Andy's conversation on the topic of coronavirus, my personal experience was that I had to leave school, leave university in the middle of the semester, and having to return home due to the coronavirus. And this is a very big problem for a lot of students. And I think it's something that the globe has to face together as a whole society. And it is obvious that most countries in the world are focusing on a way for survival, if not a cure. Which means bringing doctors, companies, and countries together in a worldwide development is very important for one another. And we need to unite in fighting for the common enemy, which is the virus right now. But could we actually see this teamwork in play? I think this question can be very complex, as we could observe different companies and universities like University of Oxford University, and AstraZeneca working together in developing a vaccine. There are also ongoing signs of political and even military tensions between countries. An example of this would be like between China and the US, with multiple cyber attacks and even the intensifying military actions surrounding Taiwan. And furthermore, we can see that human rights violations is indeed still disrupting the society. And with police brutality and multiple oppressions happening in Hong Kong, this is becoming more and more obvious, even as while we're fighting the virus. And in addition, I want to mention the tax oppression currently still happening in Taiwan, which is affecting many local citizens. Even though Taiwan is actually doing a great job in containing the virus, there are still various local and worldwide problems that are present in our lives right now.
To respond to what Andy and Matthew said, I think this pandemic really showed us that there is actually a lot to improve on. And well, personally, I'm really passionate about environmental sustainability. And I believe that this pandemic is actually like a wake-up call for the people worldwide to actually recognize our unsustainable practices that we've been taking all for decades since, or even for almost 2 centuries maybe. And because as the society is becoming more fast-paced, and as we aim for development and even more production, we often take for granted the resources that we have been exploiting. And all the disasters that have happened in 2020 are, I believe, telling us that if we don't take action and change these unsustainable practices, the world will become uninhabitable for humankind, and even more so for other species. So I think it's really important for everyone to become more conscious about our everyday actions and our surroundings as well, because inequalities, injustices, and imbalances are right next door, and they require for more people to stand up for, not just against the virus, but it's like a time for us to recognize and reflect upon ourselves what we need to work on in order to prevent another disaster, whether it's climate change, whether it's another pandemic. We have to be ready for everything or anything that can happen in the future.
Like Matthew mentioned, personally, I have experienced the Umbrella Resolution in 2014 and also the Anti-Extradition Law Amendment Bill movement in 2019, which happened in Hong Kong. And last year, millions of citizens marching peacefully on the streets in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong police responded to the protest with unnecessary and excessive use of force. I saw Hong Kong police arrested citizens without reason, and I saw innocent protesters were tackled to the ground by the policemen. Also, I saw a girl lost her eye because a projectile had hit it. Until now, I still cannot forget the taste of tear gas. I think the movement in Hong Kong was just a beginning. There has been more and more protests against the government in all around the world, such as in Indonesia, Chile, Spain, Russia, and currently in Thailand. When the government do wrong things, citizens are more braver now to speak out their voices and to protest against the government. I think no doubt now it is an era of the rise of human rights awareness.
Thank you for this round of sharing it. The same idea that COVID-19 knows no borders and doesn't target specific race or language that you speak. And the same idea goes to what Jill was saying about democracy and this this desire for our freedom is the same for all people around the world. So we can see now more and more that these are global issues that we must face together as humanity, and not just based on keep separating ourselves from each other based on race or religion, all that sorts of differences. And so that just to kind of conclude this part on the idea that Martin Luther King Jr. had once said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we hope that we can keep these encouragements in mind, that we have to face these issues together to really overcome any of these challenges. And so like we've mentioned, that there are more and more challenges that we face as humanity. So in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge right now for our future, and how can we deal with these challenges? So welcome to share your parts on this.
Thank you, Judy. I think that one of the biggest challenge we will face is economic recovery, because this is a tough year. This is a different year. Nobody will imagine that we will need to stay at home for several months. We will avoid to take a plan, and we will have a lot of challenge we cannot imagine before. And a lot of people lost their job, and they still have hard time to find a new job. Like in America, in April, their unemployment rate is about 14%. Even right now, their unemployment rate is still like 7.9%. It's really, really higher than usual, because usually it will be like 3 to 5%. So in this kind of situation, like we need to have but I want to share some tips that maybe can help for to face this challenge. Like first is you need to maintain your mental and physical health, because this is our valuable assets right now. And second is that you need to be open-minded to new choice and open-minded to the different opinions, because it's totally different right now. So we cannot just use a normal standard to view everything or view anything you haven't been before. And that's one is we definitely need to use our conscience, because maybe just a tiny movement and tiny work in our daily life will have a really huge change. Just like in our daily life, we just wash my hand and wear a mask, but we can just help our family, our friends, everyone around us. So I believe that these tips maybe will be helpful And I just want to hear anyone to share more about this part. Thank you.
So I would like to share, since I agree with Wen on her opinion on needing everyone's conscience and each and everyone around you. Personally, I worry about my education in the next few years. As an engineering student, the gap year I'm taking right now is actually taking quite a toll on my academic career, as I am lacking like in-person educations and learning hands-on things that I need as an engineering student. And the future of my generation or our generation is at stake, since the graduates this year and next year suffer greatly as they face an economic depression, as Wen said. With only a few jobs and companies available to take in employers, they're actually, it's very hard for them. And to take on this issue, I think we have to start trusting each other. And apart from large political decisions, we as world citizens have to take the responsibility of our own future to ensure each other's safety and to ensure our own safety. And by understanding what keeps each other healthy is being mature and being respectful to the world. Therefore, I think everyone's mindset can make the largest impact on our issue. And I hope that we can all work together to influence those around us and those we love.
Yeah, I think due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many people's lives has changed a lot. Like Matthew was forced to take a gap year, and like Wen said, a lot of people lose their jobs. So everyone now is looking forward to the end of the pandemic so that they can return to their original lives. But in fact, I think life before the pandemic is actually not a really good model to return. Everyone should still remember that in the first half of this year, when all human activities almost stopped, the clean air just returned and wildlife prospered. I think this may be God's kindness to give people a forced break, which proves to the world that through changing lifestyles, the deterioration of the environment can actually slow down a little bit or even recover. And sustainable development is actually possible. So when the pandemic is no longer a threat, I hope everyone can live in a new way instead of returning to their original life.
Yeah, and I also would like to add that the challenges that were all mentioned all can be considered as a global challenge instead of one that is of the local nature. Just 200-300 years ago, humanity has only been able to travel as fast as the ship or as a horse. But now, with the advent of globalization, as well as the internet and the ability for us to affect people that are literally on the other side of the globe, it is more important now that we have to address all of the challenges that we face in our world in a global manner. Challenges like climate change or increased inequalities throughout the world, as well as political and ethnic violence mentioned before between protesters and the government, are all, again, global issues and require for us to use the tools that we have to be able to solve them. Because the same channels that allow us to ship our goods and services to all corners of the world are the exact same channels that are spreading the COVID-19 pandemic. And the exact same channels on the internet can spread positivity and love to the entire world. But we also have to be reminded that those are the same channels that can spread hatred and inciting violence across the globe. And it just goes to show that as the world becomes more and more connected, the importance of human collaboration and human conscience is ever more important. because perhaps in the past, one war in one part of the world is not going to affect anything outside of that area. But as we see now, through rising political tensions, it's always going to be a ripple effect, especially in the day and age of a globalized world with fast communication. And I think the solutions to these problems must match the pace of our ability to produce technology and match the ability for us for the scientific ability that would do. Because again, science is a very neutral medium, and the same capabilities that we have can be used for good and also used for bad. So I think that through the United Nations, countries and nation states have to come together and have to work together towards specific problems, and to realize that it is at a very critical junction, because we realize that through this pandemic, a lot of places are perhaps not as well prepared. And the same pandemic can also incite different forms of civil unrest, as well as abuses of power from government taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to strengthen their authoritarian rule. I think that from this point forward, we have to always collaborate with each other instead of dividing from each other. And we have to be able to listen to our conscience instead of just putting it in the side.
I would just like to add on that I understand that everyone has different challenges they're facing regarding the pandemic, but personally, I know that I wasn't affected as much as many other people around the world. There are people that actually lost their jobs, that they can't afford food, or I understand that it's a lot worse. And I think it's also really important to recognize our privileges and to know how recognize our privileges and using our privileges to advocate for others without privileges. For example, I'm currently residing in Taiwan. Taiwan has relatively been successful in controlling the pandemic, but that doesn't mean it stops here. It means that personally, it doesn't have to be like as a nation. I am residing well in Taiwan, so how can I help those that aren't residing here or that aren't enjoying the same privileges as I do? Or it can be as easy as spreading the word of what's going on around the world, or even donating if you have the power to. I think it's just really important to have this awareness about what's going on and recognize that each, because I think what's going on around the world is that, well, and also like the wake up call right now, it's telling us to give up something. Like those that are privileged, we need to give us something so that we can redistribute this inequality or imbalance around the world. So I think it's recognizing that we are well off and knowing or finding ways to help others that are more so in need. Yeah, so I think, that's what I would like to add. And thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I really like that addition to this topic, because that question, what are you willing to give up to make this world a better place? So I think it's a good question for us to invite our audience to kind of think about that too. What is something that you're very used to, but perhaps at this moment in time in the world, it's something that we can live without and can help make the world a better place. So thank you for bringing that to the end of that conversation. We really can't expect things to go back to exactly the way it was before COVID-19. It is an opportunity, like many of you have mentioned, for us to reflect on what we are doing right and what we're doing wrong, and to change it for good. And so this type of reflection goes on for all aspects of our lives, not only for COVID-19. We can reflect ourselves, we can reflect on the global lifestyle, we can even reflect on, some people have mentioned, people's equal rights. And this type of reflection is absolutely necessary, because we all know that without reflection on ourselves or around us, we lose balance of the way we think and the way we act. So we like to encourage everyone to constantly reflect on all of these issues that are around us. And so with this topic next, we'd like to show you a video of an incident that happened in Taiwan on September 19th. The incident serves as a reminder that the reflection and reform is it's very greatly needed in Taiwan in order to protect the citizens' human rights. So let's take a look.
当初太阳花那些人士进到立法院，他们也没有申请啊。
立法院不在管制里面。
那这里是有管制吗？请问一下，这边是有管制吗？这边有管制吗？我们请问一下警察大哥，
我们这么多人集结在一起，是意图要做什么呢？
没有，我们没有做什么啊。
那如果没有要做什么，为什么要害怕我们警察站在这里？
平常人看到这么多警察人，这个1个、2个、3个、4、5、6、7、8、9，
我们平常人看到你们这么多人集结在一起，我们也会担心害怕啊，担心害怕你们聚众斗殴。
我们没有聚众斗殴，
那就好，
那就有违法的时候再告诉我们，或者说可以举牌。我们看到你们举牌，我们会问到底我们是哪里违法了，好不好？这样子。现在警察大哥说，因为这一个上面写了有名字呢，对，不要碰我们的东西哦。他说上面有写了名字，然后所以因为这样就，这警察还蛮凶的。
召集查实学习申法，我要盘查你。
他要盘查，好，他现在要盘查志工。
针对我的人点拍照，你可以针对整个现场做拍照。
小姐，你要出示证件吗？
在那边录。
可以拍我的那张，但是不能拍我的脸。
身份证号。如果你不接受警官拍了盘查身份的话，
我们现在把至少我们先收证哈，我们先收。
不要在旁边一直大小声。
好，我们没有大小声。
大的权利。
好，我们现在来听这个，我们在直播。
你的权利。
好。
依照警察。
你现在不要讲那么多，拿全部的权利。
我要现在盘查你身份，请你输入证件。如果不是证件，我有权把你带回。
警察好凶哦
！3个小时。依法。我们现在依法行政，请你到旁边去。
我没有。好。
小姐，你要报出你的身份，还是要跟我回去？
报身份。
你要报身份还是？
他如果离开这里可以吗？
不用报身份。
我们想要问一下。
要盘查身份。
他要盘查他的身份。
谁拿我去盘查谁，谁录我就盘查谁。
收证有什么好收证的？我们了解一下而已嘛。
叫他举牌，带举牌手过来。
举牌手，我们没有强暴胁迫，你没办法举牌哦。对，我们就请这个所长说明一下案情。好，谢谢。
侦查不公开，好不好？侦查不公开，不方便，好不好？侦查不公开。
没有，现在是告诉告发，还没进入侦查阶段。
我们从现在开始就已经逮捕他之后，就可以开始进入侦查程序了。
刑事诉讼法228条，侦查开始是检察官，警察只是告诉告发，
警察协助检察官侦查犯罪，好不好？就这样子。
拜托，你检察官还没开始好吗？你现在还是告诉告发，你现在还没侦查开始，你现在还调查阶段。还调查阶段，
对手好不好？
刑事诉讼法228条、229条、230条，所以警察是229、230，必须228条，检察官依告诉告发开始侦查，侦查开始。所以现在没有侦查不开始的时候，现在是警察的调查阶段，告诉跟告发的阶段。对不对，所长？你说对不对？
所长，你送人过来应该有基本的要件要符合，对不对？那你是说他当场有人在那边恐吓他吗？
恐吓他说了什么恐吓的话？可不可以？
我不用回答你的问题，好不好？
人不在，
侦查不公开，侦查不公开，好不好？
恐吓
他现在重新要开始做笔录了，好不好？因为就是为了等你们陈教授，他刚已经问到最后一句话了，然后为了配合你们作秀，然后整个侦查就停下来。
你侮辱我作秀，
没有录下。
302条也不成立呀，也不能够302条还送给检察官侦讯，这没有必要啊，对不对？这没有，这又不是重大犯罪，又不是杀人罪，又不是当场殴打或怎么样，
案件举牌而已，好吗？
这个有现行犯吗？有送地检署的必要吗？你就检察官再另外开传票再问就好了，就让人家出来嘛，对不对？
他脑袋装的是威权，不断的扩钱。今天你们怎么可以扩到这种地步？那我们警察先生。怎么可以2个首长这样讲出的东西是颠三倒四？警察是没有权利接通一通电话就把人家扣了呢？你要看什么？看文件啊，告诉状啊，没有告诉状是不告不理的嘞。你们不能够没有告诉状、没有收走证就把它收证啊。收证的东西证据叫做无效呢，不能呈堂供证呢。
刚刚我在里面就是他们说没有签名也没关系，就直接把我妈妈带走，而且他叫我走正门出来骗我，然后把我妈妈从侧门就带走，我根本不知道。他们就说直接带去地检署，然后没有签名也没关系。
为什么把人带走
？60几岁的妈妈这样子，
你要给他签名吗？你为什么让他把人带走？为什么把人带走
？60几岁的老人家这样子。
下去。
在直播面前已经见证了警察没有在保护人民的权利，不断的用权力，所以我们如果遇到不守法的人，不保护百姓，我们不用浪费时间，所以我们现在全部到地检署，只要有问题的，一定追到你。
今天我们请求值班的内勤检察官出来。按铃喽！
哎呦，我现在头脑一团乱哎，就感觉一堆警察围着我觉得好害怕哦。
你把人弄成要紧急送医，然后你把人这么小的案件，你竟然滥用职权这样搞，滥用职权，对不对？全世界、全台湾从来没有因为一个举牌，因为所谓的妨碍名誉罪的问题310条，然后你就可以滥用警察权力，你就用警察国家，你怎么可以这样搞呢？
So through this video, about 7 minutes long, you can see that from the video, the incident started with some people holding up protest signs and it spiraled into a 10-hour ordeal. And I'm sure for the lady who was detained and her family, this incident is not just a 10-hour ordeal. I can't even begin to imagine what they had to go through afterwards. And from my understanding that in many democratic countries, an act of holding up a protest sign peacefully, as the lady from the video did, it is actually her right to exercise freedom of speech. And the police had mentioned that the problem was with the wording of the sign, which on the day of the incident was seen in other places as well in other protesters' hands, and also days after in experts who were trying to speak up for the incident. He was holding the sign, nothing happened to them. So why was this lady individually picked out is the question that we want to know, in the way, and also the way it was carried out. We can see from the video, the police were very angry about things that very, very minor. I think if the person was, with weapon or armed and the police was angry, it makes a lot more sense. But the lady was not, as you can see. She was standing there, didn't really know what was going on and what the police wanted, but the police was shouting a lot. And the police also stated in the video that if the lady did not provide her ID, she would be arrested. However, she did provide her ID, so why was she arrested anyway? So these are questions that all people around Taiwan are, we must wonder. We have to think about this, because even though I don't know this lady, I'm not her family members, but we are all, people in Taiwan want to know, because they need to know, what if it happens to you too, right? You need to know when to protect yourself. And also at 2 minutes, 24 seconds, the police said, I will question whoever films me. I will question whoever films this. I believe that this is simply an ill practice of authority and a threat. What type of threat is that? Because citizens do have a right to film such scenarios in Taiwan as stated in the law. So we must be aware of what is going on to make sure that we can fully exercise our rights wherever we reside. And so we wanted to use this incident as a lead into what we hope to see as an improvement in Taiwan's human rights protection. And we now like to hear from our youth what you think about this incident and how it may be harmful to Taiwan's democracy. And we'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think in contrast with several countries, Taiwan really has a reputation of beacon of democracy. But I think the event Judy just mentioned, this incident is completely inconsistent with the image of beacon of democracy. Taiwan has lifted martial law for more than 30 years, but through this incident, we can find that among the permanent civil service officials who will not change due to party rotation or election result, there are some concepts that are still in the period of martial law and have not evolved with the times. And the most exaggerative point of this incident is that, as the law professor, Professor Wu, said that, I have never heard that the criminals were arrested for defamation and sent to the district prosecutor's office and interrogated at night. This procedure is flawed and totally illegal.
If I can add to it, I think what Andy and Jill has said is, I think for the rest of the world who practice democracy, like all of us after seeing that video is completely shocked, especially since, you know, Taiwan has the reputation of, you know, a very democratic country, a country that follows human rights. But I think this is also a wake-up call to the rest of Taiwan, because we understand, like, if an incident like this happens, we can't think of it as an outlier. Because I think the whole outlier, you know, an event that, you know, is not the norm, it definitely isn't the norm, but at the same time, when it comes to justice and when it comes to human rights, any outlier shouldn't happen. Like, when it happens, then it is all of our duty, like as citizens, all of us who wants democracy, all of us who wants human rights, all of us that practice it, understands that we need to stop it immediately. Like, if you have a bucket of water, if it starts leaking, we're not going to just continue to let it leak and continue using it. What we're going to do is we're going to fix that, you know, hole in the bucket, and then we're going to continue to, you know, fix it so we could continue to use it. And I think that's the case of what is happening with this incident. I think a lot of people might say, well, you know, it's just that one minimal thing. But the thing is, when you're looking at it, it's showing that there is an abuse of your basic right, your right of speech, right? So, because in America, we have freedom of speech. And so I can hold up any signs, I could write anything I want, as long as it's not actually harming people, like shouting fire in a theater, then I would be fine because I am endowed with that right. But when we see what is happening here is, even though they're holding a sign, police is able to, you know, just with a phone call, just come over and try to arrest people. And I think what Judy was saying is, like, why is it only this person? Because, you know, it's at the same time, it's like they want to make you scared of, you know, going against, you know, voicing out your opinions, voicing out what you think, you know, the government needs to fix. And I don't think that is okay in a democratic country, because if we're actually going to successfully have human rights and have democracy, then the government needs to listen to the people and fix the mistake instead of trying to silence the people. And I think a lot of time I see on the forum, because I saw as this going on, you know, I was doing a little bit of research. I think a lot of time people's argument is that, well, you know, we do have freedom of speech. See, like, if you don't have freedom of speech, how are you allowed to, you know, talk about this online? But just because you have some freedom of speech doesn't mean that when one is taken away, it's insignificant. I kind of think of it as in America, when we have unequal pay for women and male, it's like we're still saying, like, hey, you know, we deserve to have equal pay. like just because we're getting paid like 73% doesn't mean that that's fair. It's same thing here. It's like if you have any of your human rights taken away, then that is not okay, and that is not acceptable in any country, especially in, you know, the century we are now. So I think again, it is unacceptable, and people needs to continue to stand up and understand that this is not something we can be silent about, because you never know if we are silent about this one thing, what is going to happen if it continues. What if it continues to worsen? What if more and more of your right is taken away? So, you know, I encourage more people to kind of watch this video, understand what is going on, and continue to share this, because people need to know, and the government needs to know, that the citizen will not accept this abuse of power and human rights. Yeah.
Thank you, Emmy. Your sharing actually reminded me of a previous incident similar with the protesters talking to the police, and the police kept yelling back that Taiwan is a democratic country, you can appeal through the proper ways, and the volunteers were basically saying that they had appealed through all the many different ways and many times, but didn't receive anything back. But as I was watching that video from then when the police was saying that Taiwan is a democratic country, don't worry, and I'm just thinking in my head that we aren't democratic, or we don't have respect for human rights just by saying it, right? We have to put it into practice. We have to actually put in the effort, and these efforts are not just from the government, but all people of Taiwan. Democracy isn't just that votes in your hand, but also your right to speak up for anything that is unjust. So thank you for bringing that up. And another point from this is that from the video that understanding is that the lady in the video was protesting against unjust tax system in Taiwan, and one of the cases that they had been talking about a lot was the Taichman case. So if you could share with us your thoughts on the Taichman case, or human rights and taxpayers' human rights situation in Taiwan, we'll hand it over to you to talk about this topic.
Recently, I watched a video which was filmed by a famous YouTuber in Hong Kong, Mr. Xiao Rouyuan, and talking about the Taichman case. Mr. Xiao, he pointed out some important points, and which I think is pretty ridiculous. First, while the tax bureau can disobey the court ruling, the third instance ruling of the criminal court specified that the tax bills are invalid. Then why the tax bureau can keep issuing tax bills? And the second one is that, what is the function of our control yuan? In 1998, the control yuan investigated and determined that the tax bureau was involved in 7 major violations, but the tax bureau still keep issuing tax bills. And in 2002, the control yuan asked the ministry to deal with prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren abusing his power by suing the Shifu of Taichman for fraud and tax evasion. However, the ministry did not punish Hou Kuan-ren for misconduct. Instead, he was even promoted to another higher position. I was so surprised that there has been many international scholars paying attention to this case. Therefore, I call on our government to resolve this case immediately before our government exposes our country to ridicule.
Yeah, and in fact, I found that there are still a lot more cases about tax and laws happened in Taiwan. Just like in the first half of this year, there was a case in Taiwan where a house worth around 2 to 3 million was auctioned off by enforcement agency for arrears of traffic fines of 18,000. And this month, October, there was another case where a house worth more than 20 million were seized because of arrears of car license tax of 38,000. And the enforcement agency has overdid the enforcement of small fines, severely violates the principle of proportionality. The people owe taxes and fees, and enforcement agency take action on real estate rights right away, leaving the people facing a crisis of homeless. However, I found that most of the comments below these news express their support for such harsh administrative sensation. People was like, you deserve it, it serves you right. So it can be clearly seen that there is still much room for improvement in the concept of the rule of law of the people and officials in Taiwan. In particular, for officials, bonuses can be collected when they enforce people's property. Experts and scholars say that this is a legacy of the martial law period, and it is an improper system working only in Taiwan.
I think going off of what Andy said, I have also recognized that in Taiwan, the administrative remedy system is also really needs to be improved on. Because although the powers of governmental entities, they're supposed to be balanced and they're supposed to check among each other, it didn't happen in practice. So what happens when people, when they try to appeal for a tax bill that they believe were issued unjustly, like the current system, the system just doesn't protect the people. So for example, in Taiwan, if people want to appeal and say that their tax bill was issued wrongfully, or if it was based on false evidences, if they want to ask what evidences it was based on, during the process, if people do not pay half of their tax bill during the process, they face compulsory enforcement, such as what Andy said, like property forced into auction, deduction from bank accounts, or even banning of traveling. And these are the prices people have to pay in Taiwan before a tax bill is even verified to be legal or not, if it was even verified to be true or not, because again, like that tax bill can be a mistake. But because of the current system, it's really hard for the people to tell the government about what mistakes they've made. So this just shows that they treat the entity or the system treat people as if they're guilty until proven innocent, instead of innocent until being proven guilty. And this is really problematic because if you're required to pay a certain fee, but you don't even have the money, then you face your human rights being taken away from you. And furthermore, in Taiwan, like when a case reaches the administrative court, oftentimes the judge, even when they recognize that this case or this tax bill is wrong, they still won't make the decision, and instead they return the case to the Taxation Bureau. This means that the Taxation Bureau can tweak the numbers and reissue the bill with the same reason. And it just goes on an everlasting cycle, and hence the phenomenon of the everlasting tax bill. And Taiji Men, the case that Mrs. Huang has been advocating for, had been through this process for almost 20 times, and the truth has already been clear that in the current system, that tax bills are really hard to abolish, even if they're false, fake, or even just a mistake. And Taiji Men has been through this for 24 years, and I also really admire Taiji Men's spirit because they continue to fight and advocate for against this unjust system. And this just shows that this again threatens people's human rights, as the Taxation Bureau can deem anyone guilty without disclosing proof or allowing them to use even false evidences, just like in the Taiji Men case. And I think it's also really important that the government, for the government to enforce reforms of the taxation remedy system to better protect and to ensure people's human rights. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work to improve on, and definitely when people try to voice or tell the government their mistakes, the government should listen and try to help the people and recognize that they have made a mistake. Yeah.
And I would like to add that, as the previous speakers have mentioned, that in the Taiji Men tax case, there are a lot of different abuses of power in multiple different forms, like the one that you have to pay a certain amount before you can even appeal, or else you are by default guilty. And that is a very dangerous notion, especially in a democracy, because it is impossible to prove a negative. In court systems, under democratic countries, it should always be innocent until proven guilty, because it is impossible to, it's impossible, well, for example, if you did not steal anything, how is it possible to prove that you did not steal anything if given the assumption is that you did steal anything? But again, that assumption comes without evidence. It's very important that these abuses of powers are recognized and are overturned in the law, but also in practice. A lot of the officials that did prosecute Taiyi Jimin, even though they did break laws that are currently under Taiwan tax law, in practice, they still were able to climb higher and higher positions of power without being prosecuted, without being removed from these positions of power. And another thing is that if you are a public servant, or if you work for the government, especially in a democracy, your boss is actually the people. And so you should use that position of power, use that position of privilege to ensure that all of the laws are being followed, that people are paying their taxes, but definitely not to use that power to enrich yourself through secret bonus plans or through politics that somehow increases your position of power without you even doing a good job. And I believe that the majority of these people that work in the Taiwanese government are genuinely good people. But with this power comes at least a sense that being a bystander is not enough. And the fact of the matter is simply maintaining a status quo is actually the wrong thing to do. We see in the Taiyi Jimin tax case that a lot of times this case was thrown around to different departments with no action, even though perhaps these departments did not directly lead into the prosecution of Taiyi Jimin, but their inaction is also a failure to deliver justice. But that action from government officials to correct past wrongs requires a lot of courage and a willingness to change. Because no one, no entity, no nation state, no government is ever going to be free from wrongdoing or free from mistakes that we'll make. But the important things is that once these mistakes do happen, how does one respond? How does a government respond? How does officials respond? And I think that response shows the true character of an individual or a government. That once a mistake has been made, that you do not simply just hide it, you do not simply pass it on to other people, but have, again, the courage and the willingness to progress and to change, to take it upon yourselves, to act as defenders of the people of a country. And I think that we see a lot of times in the Taiyi Jimin tax case, it's very, very important for us to continue to press and fight for these rights, because if we don't fight for these rights, if we do not press for our rights, then the government can simply ignore them. Even though it is illegal, in practice, we have to always continue, even as mentioned, the outliers. We always have to ensure that even in those cases, justice is served at the end. Otherwise, the system itself cannot stand.
I agree very much with Alan. In the Taiyi Jimin case, we can see that is a very big part about the correction system. If there is a mistake made by the government, how can they correct themselves so the people do deserve get the justice that they deserve? From the Taiyi Jimin case, we can see from the very beginning the fact that they used the same amount of money, called it fraud, and then also called it cram school fee and wanted to tax it, and the fact that it violates the double jeopardy rule, and that the violation itself proves that the case started on a kind of crazy basis, and then that it's continued on for 24 years from a violation of Taiwan's law of double jeopardy, that it's able to exist today, shows, you know, what Alan was kind of mentioning about this system of how can we correct our mistakes in the system and the government system. And kind of thinking back to how we started today's forum about United Nations, talking about human rights, how all people are created equal, and bringing that into our governmental system, may it be democracy, anything else, is the need to have laws in order to kind of keep everyone safe. But exactly because of that, we have authorities kind of ruling over the general public is a very big, they need to be constantly reminded that having this power, they need to be even more modest. They need to have more care for the people. Also kind of what Alan was saying is having these rights does not make you a greater person, because we're all created equal. So no one has the power to say more than someone else that I can do this, you cannot. So being willing to be a public servant means you really need to listen to what the people need. And continuing on that, American activist Roger Baldwin has once said, "Silence never won rights. They are not handed down from above. They are forced by pressures from below." So what are your thoughts as we come to the end of these discussions on expectations for the future in terms of human rights, respect, and democracy? And once again, we'll hand it over to you to share your thoughts.
Well, I think it's really important for, like what Alan said, for governments to actually admit and correct their mistakes, because, yeah, governments are made up of humans, and humans are known for making mistakes, and it's a given. But then it's important for them to actually recognize their mistakes, and also because the government's purpose is to protect the people, and the reason we have a government is because we the people have made a deal with the government saying, you protect us, then we all pay taxes, or like this compromise between the two entities. But then when they're people, then people should have their rights, and people should not be afraid to speak up and point out their mistakes. So I also really think it's important for people to gain independent thinking, to point out, to listen more, to understand more about what's going on around us, and to try to advocate or try to think within yourself, and instead of just following what the government says, because they're not always right. Yeah, so I think it's really important for people to gain awareness, not just political awareness, for anything, awareness about what's happening around us, so that we can stand up for each other. And because one day it may become one of us. I maybe become a victim in any of the unjust systems. So I think it's really important for people to stand up and advocate for each other, and to gain a understanding, and just to listen more, because we're all learning at the same time, and also be really understanding towards each other, and try to not cause more conflict or try to cause more misunderstanding, to try to use peace and understanding to resolve these conflicts, and hopefully build up a more healthier environment for sustainable change.
Yeah, I would like to follow Erica. She mentioned the importance of the right of speech, because in our discussion today, we talk about Taichung case and the incidents in our video that's a totally violation of the right of speech. And in America, we also see the Black Lives Matter protest. In Thailand recently, they just have a protest. So we know that it's really important people have a right to express themselves freely. And also it's really important that government, they need to follow their rules and laws to do anything from like their project, their like policy, so and so on. So no matter where we are and no matter which government you belong to, I think that is really important that we need to protect and respect human rights and our freedom to speech.
I think Erica and Wen basically said a lot of the thing I was thinking about. I think all of us are thinking about it. You know, when there are such injustice that has been happening for so long and so much abuse that has been happening, we continue to call out for the government to do something about it. But it seems like, you know, after so many years of, you know, these protests or like these reforms, like there's baby steps towards, you know, having a better system, but it's still not enough. And I think, yes, the government should be held accountable because the purpose of the government is to protect and serve the people. But I also think it's also, at this point, it's also the people that needs to understand it is part of their duty as a citizen of this country to stand up and continue to say, you know, we are aware of this wrongdoing, we will not tolerate it anymore, and you need to reform, or you as a government official do not have the right to continue to hold your position because you're obviously not doing your job. And I think you know, what's happening now of like bringing more awareness to the case is exactly what, you know, we should be doing. And then how do we continue to, you know, spread the message, letting more and more people know this injustice of this like abuse of human rights. In terms of what the future of human rights, respect, and democracy holds, I think, you know, the government can be wrong. Often we see in history a lot of time like government falls, or you know, a country or kingdoms falls because they are not protecting the human rights of the people. And so I think instead of more worrying about, you know, what is happening with this current government system, I'm more worried about the people kind of becoming, you know, turning a blind eye towards these causes, because I think with so much stressors, you know, pandemic, life, and everything happening, people sometimes just want to turn away from things that seems to be added on stress. But I think it's also what we should do is continue bringing awareness, like, you know, these are things we cannot escape because it affects all of our daily lives. It affects, you know, everybody pays taxes. It affects all of us. So as a citizen, as part of the society, we need to stand up and we need to say enough is enough, and we need to continue to work towards actually bettering the system.
Thank you, Emmy, for wrapping that part up. And I don't think we need to be an activist or to be political or to, you know, bring up controversial conversations to promote these issues. All we need to have that care and passion in our hearts to kind of reach out to help each other. That is all we need. And so with the end of this conversation today, we actually like to share with you a beautiful project that has been done by a couple of youth that I think we can all relate to and bring some hope to us. So please enjoy the video, The Flame of Heart.
Hi, my name is Bobby, and I am here to share why I made an animation calling for people's attention towards 1219 and the Tax Reform Federation in Taiwan. It was actually a coincidence where one of my friends is involved in the protest, and I was hanging out with her earlier during the day, and I got curious about the protest and what it's actually about, so I tagged along with her. And when I was there in the crowd with the people at first, I felt that I was kind of out of place because everyone else beside me knows exactly what they're doing, whereas me, I initially didn't know why I was there. But quickly, as I was observing the situation and people around me and what the speakers have to say on the stage, I feel like I started to really feel what the crowd was feeling. For example, the anger, the sorrow, and the disappointment towards the government, and most of all, the will to call for a change and the urge to see the change happen. I feel like that was really, like, I felt the same way as them. And what I saw there was determination and dedication, and it was something that is very impactful. And at the same time, I realized how easy it is to ignore or look away when something is not impacting you directly. I feel like it's happening every day and in most of our lives, where so many things happen either in a global context or in a local context, and they all urgently need our attention. And it is very easy to gradually feel numb about them and look away. But when you actually see it in front of you, like presented in front of you, and when you are surrounded by people who is fighting, it is really hard to look away. And I think it's natural for anyone to hold themselves accountable when you're feeling that and at that moment. And it is very natural for people to want to be a part of the fight. And that is what I felt. And that is when I realized maybe that's what I have to offer, to use what I am capable of to create a video for people to look at, and in the same time creating coincidences for the audiences to know and want to know more about this movement.
正义感是心中时刻燃烧不灭的火苗。害怕烫伤的我们，正因畏惧批判或事不关己，将它在心中的角落搁置。但它一直都在，一样炙热，一样耀眼，只等着我们放开心胸触碰。习惯待在舒适又凉快影子里的我们，是不是该是时候踏出那一步了？重返阳光，让人性和良知引领我们，停止抗拒心中那份引力，那与生俱来的良知和脸颊上的热泪是不会骗人的。当心中的磁铁连接在一起，就会产生更大的磁场力量。呵护着心里的火苗，是为了在对的时机点让正义得以伸张。不要怕，他人吹熄烈火的尝试能成为助燃的氧气。更要记得，星星之火得以燎原。
So we hope that through the video you feel that hope, you feel the passion that's always been there to kind of join us in this time, to join the United Nations in shaping our future together, protecting our own rights and protecting the people around us. It is a hard time, a challenging time for all people around the world, but it is a perfect timing, like we've mentioned in today's conversation, that it could be a turning point for us to look at things from a completely different perspective. We can make changes, sacrifices. What is something that I'm willing to lose to make this world a better place, as Erica mentioned in her question earlier. So we hope you enjoyed today's forum, and we look forward to seeing change in our lives with all of our friends and family. So hope you enjoyed today's forum. Thank you for joining us once again. Bye.